What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and we're doing another spoiler review of some of the cards that have been previewed over the last week, or actually of all the cards that have been previewed over the last week. This was originally going to go up on Saturday, but a few cards were not uploaded at that time onto SwooDB, and additionally, it was getting kind of late, and so I decided I was going to film it today instead. My apologies for the delay, but let's get right into it. First up, we have Kit Fisto, the Smiling Jedi. He's a 6-cost aggression ground unit, a 7/6 with the Force Jedi and Republic traits. He has Saboteur and Coordinate. On attack, you may deal 3 damage to a ground unit. So to me, this is kind of an interesting situation. It's a I think Kit Fisto is in a category that a lot of units are in, honestly, where he is good if you ambush him. You know, with 7 attack, even without coordinate enabled, this is still going to defeat leaders in one shot, or at least most leaders. The Saboteur can help you get through shields, can help you get past sentinels, and he has the Force and Jedi traits afterwards, as well as Republic, which is going to hopefully get you some value as well. But if you're not ambushing Kit Fisto, I'm really skeptical, because then he's a 6-cost unit with no immediate board impact, and that really tends to be a bad category to be in. So my general feeling is that this is going to be another one of those, do you have Energy Conversion Lab? You know, maybe you have Admiral Piet, maybe you have Heroic Intervention, but without one of those synergy cards that can grant ambush, I'm really skeptical that Kit Fisto is going to end up being good. And this is kind of a large situation in the game as a whole with respect to these 5 and 6 cost units that don't have an immediate impact. It seems that ambush makes them just so much better. We're going to see if that continues to be a dynamic in the game as a whole. You know, it's possible they have some stuff that's going to change that, but at least right now, I think Kit Fisto for me is in the good with ambush, bad without ambush category. All right, now we have Bloodsport, 3-cost aggression event, deal 2 damage to each ground unit. I think this card's going to be really good. So why do I think this one's going to be good when other cards like it were not necessarily so widely played? So we can look at, in particular, I want to take a look at Bombing Run. So Bombing Run, this did see some play in the in particular in the Red Iden control decks. I think did play Bombing Run. It was not like an unheard of card at that time, but I think that it just wasn't ultimately a very efficient card for the meta that we had in set 1 or now in set 2. 5 is expensive, and 3 damage is often not quite enough to deal with threats. I think its main use was actually in space, where you would see these swarms of smaller ships, especially from like the Sabine aggro decks. You know, maybe they have an A-Wing, Red 3, some other ship, and Bombing Run to wipe those is pretty good. But I don't know, it would still be kind of a sideboardy card and often not played. Well, Bloodsport, first off, it only costs 3 instead of 5, so you can use it much earlier in a game. One of the problems with Bombing Run is that it's slow and the opponent might already be setting up. The other thing, though, that I think makes Bloodsport really good is it seems almost tailor-made to take out tokens in a set that is heavily involving tokens as a new theme. So if we look at our Clone Trooper, if we look at our Clone Trooper token, this is a 0-cost 2/2. If we look at our Battle Droid, you know, this is a 0-cost 1/1. So a Bombing Run is actually going to clear all the Clone Troopers and Battle Droids. And therefore, I think at the very least, this may well end up being a sideboardy sort of card that people use to counter token-based decks. Now, how many people are going to play token-based decks? It's hard to tell. Just because something's a new mechanic doesn't mean it's necessarily going to see a ton of play. But to me, I do think it's likely that we're going to see them at least some, and I think this card is going to be a relevant counter. Okay. One note, though, is it does only hit ground, and it would be better if you had the choice of ground or space as you do with Bombing Run. But I think that like the ground arena is often more important since ground units are more efficient, and ultimately I think this will probably still be worth playing. You know, is it going to be the absolute best card ever? I kind of doubt it, honestly, but I think it's going to play an important role as a board clear. Okay. Next up, the Elite P-38 Starfighter, 3-cost Cunning Villainy Space Unit, 3/2 with the Separatist Vehicle and Fighter traits. When played or when defeated, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. Now, is that going to be good? You know, I'm not really sure about this one. I think it's very much in the I think it's very much in an interesting state. So I think it's probably going to end up being good, because being able to deal 1 damage to a unit, we were looking earlier at that battle droid token that just has 1 HP. So you can play this and kill a battle droid. When defeated, you can do 1 damage. You can use this to ping off shields. The question is it going to be as good as playing cards like the 7th Fleet Defender, which has the same stat line and comes with a shield instead? I think this ability is probably going to be good, and it also has Separatist synergy, which seems quite possibly like it's going to end up being strong. But I could imagine a world where cards like this end up not really being the best ever. That being said, I think it's easily within like an acceptable power level for limited, and probably going to be good enough to see at least some constructed play. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe battle droids won't be a big deal, so these sorts of effects won't be as good as they first seem. But to me, it seems like this is going to be pretty strong. All right, next up we have Mace Windu, Vapad Form Master. He is a leader unit with the aggression heroism aspect. As an action, you can spend 1 and exhaust to deal 1 damage to a damaged enemy unit, and then if it has 5 or more damage on it, deal 1 damage to it. So this is interesting. It's a ping damage effect, but it only works on things that are already damaged, and it works better on units that are heavily damaged. So it works better on bigger targets, which is kind of the opposite of how these ping damage abilities usually work. Then Mace deploys on 7 resources, and when he deploys, he has a 5/8 Force Jedi Republic traits, and when deployed, deal 2 damage to each damaged enemy unit. So he is really a leader that can punish opponents if they are partially damaged but not immediately removed. It kind of makes me think he'll do well with that Bloodsport card that we just saw. It only hits for 2, but if hitting your opponents for 2 allows you to set up these abilities to do more damage to them, maybe that'll end up being good. I am a little skeptical, though, both because his ability seems a little awkward in its timing, and also because 7-cost 5/8 leader, I don't know. Like, Vader's good. Or at least Vader's at least decently strong. He's not like the best leader ever, but he's not terrible. But 7 deploy leaders, that really does seem like it's kind of late at this point. Honestly, even 6 deploy seems late at this point, with so many strong leaders deploying on 5 or even 4 resources. I don't know. We'll have to see how this guy does. I'm a little skeptical just because he's slow and his ability seems a bit clunky, but maybe this is going to be a good way to combine kind of smaller removal cards that are going to allow you to put damage on, that are going to allow you to deal with swarms and so on, but then giving this ability will allow you to maybe pack more of a punch and convert those smaller removal cards into things that are relevant against big targets as well. Now that's, is it going to line up like that? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how he does. All right, next up, Mace Windu's Lightsaber, 2-cost Aggression Heroism. It's an upgrade that gives +2/+2 attached to a non-vehicle unit. When played, if attached units Mace Windu, draw 2 cards. Yeah, so 2-cost +2/+2 upgrades are pretty decent. Cards like Academy Training, that's a totally playable card in Limited, and not a totally garbage card in Constructed either. And so this is a 2-cost +2/+2. It does attach to a non-vehicle unit, which means it can't be used in space or on certain ground units, but the fact that it works with Mace Windu to allow 2 draws does seem like something that could end up having a fair amount of value, and I think it's going to be especially good if we see a scenario where there's a cheaper Mace Windu unit that goes in your deck normally. That would be more appealing maybe than using this with the leader, just because the leader is kind of late in the game. But if we see a 3 or 4 cost Mace Windu and you can then play this on him, give him a nice buff, and then also draw 2 cards, that could be quite solid. Overall, I think this is going to be at least decent. And whether or not it ends up being quite good depends on what we see by way of unit Mace Windu. All right, next up we have Pow City. This is a 26 HP base. Each leader you control gets +1 HP. Okay, so this is a weird one. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm saying it's weird. And I think that's an important distinction to make with some of these cards. So I have a video that discusses this in more detail, but I think that the key factor with this base is going to be whether or not it gets your leader across a key breakpoint. So, one example of this would be we can look at we can look at Chirrut. Chirrut he has this ability when he deploys during the action phase. This unit isn't defeated by having no remaining HP, so he's really tough to kill. The problem is he's weak to effects that are direct defeat abilities, and he only has 5 HP, and that means that he is in range of Takedown. So Takedown says defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP, and here's Chirrut. He can't be defeated by having no remaining HP, but he only has 5, and Takedown can just defeat him immediately and get through this ability, which is a big problem for him. And in the past, I've been using Regional Governor and stuff to counter Takedown in a Chirrut deck, but here we have another option that I think is actually very interesting. So if you have Pow City, your Chirrut now has 6 HP. And do you want to play double blue Chirrut? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the idea of being able to just make your leader cross that breakpoint and be much harder to kill in exchange for 4 HP on your base seems like it could be very worth it. Similarly, maybe if you were playing blue Sabine, you could use this to get Sabine up to 6 HP herself. Now she doesn't die to Force Choke, doesn't die to Takedown. Blue Sabine tends to be kind of an upgrade-based deck, so maybe a 6 HP Sabine is more likely to live to get those upgrades going in the first place. I think it might have a relevant role in at least some builds. 4 HP on the base is, it's tough. It's definitely not something that you can just give away for free. But if the 1 HP on your leader makes you much more able to execute your strategy or defeat some of the things that would otherwise counter your build, I think it could very well be worth it. Now, we'll have to see. One other thing that I think is a positive note for this one is that the existing blue-based security complex is not used all that commonly. So there's less marginal cost than if you were giving up ECL or something, and is that going to be enough to make this relevant? We'll have to see. One note that a lot of people brought up is it does say each leader unit you control, and that means that if you're playing Twin Suns and you have 2 leaders, well, now you have 2 different cards that can be buffed by Pow City, and that's pretty sweet. Okay. Next up, we have Twice the Pride. This is a 2-cost double aggression upgrade. When played, deal 2 damage to attached unit, and it gives +4 power. So I think this card's actually quite cool. It's a flexible unit. It's a flexible upgrade. So one thing you can do with it is you can play it on your own unit, give it +4 power, take the hit, but that's fine, and do a lot of damage to the opponent's base, or maybe this allows you to trade with a powerful unit that they have on the field. But this can also be used as a removal card. You can attach this to your opponent's unit and give it 2 damage, and if that's the damage that you need to remove it, well, there you go. One other thing that I'll say about this is that it does work on both ground and space units. I actually think this one's pretty good. I think the flexibility and the potential strength here is quite relevant. Maybe your opponent's tapped out and you get to play this on a space unit, give it +4, hit them really hard, and now that unit's also a very high priority for your opponent to deal with before it swings again. So I think both for the ability to potentially add a lot of damage to the opponent cheaply, and for the ability to be a conditional sort of removal thing that you can use to defeat a damaged unit of your opponent's, I think this card is going to end up being good. It is, of course, double red, so I think it will more or less only see play in double red builds, but in those builds, which I've played a fair bit, I think it has some real potential power. Next up, we have Equalized. This one's a double blue card. 3 costs, double blue, give a unit -2/-2 for this phase. Then if you control fewer units than that unit's controller, give another unit -2/-2 for this phase. So it's worth noting that because it says another unit, you cannot use this to stack both of these debuffs and give the unit -4/-4. So it's only going to be relevant against smaller targets. That being said, you can potentially defeat multiple units with this card. So you can, let's say the opponent has 2 Clone Trooper tokens. Well, you just got a 2 for 1. You play Equalized, hit both of them, and that's that. Is that going to be good enough? I don't know. I do think the timing here means that if you kill the first unit and that means you now have an even number of units, you don't get the second ability. I could be wrong on that, but because it says give a unit -2/-2 and then I do think it checks after the -2/-2 goes off. Could be wrong, but that is a potential weak point for the I think, for the card. Like, let's say you have 2 units and they have 3, you play this and kill one of their units, and then, well, now they have, now it's 2 and 2, and you don't get the second effect. Now, to be fair, you could decide to, in that situation, use the first -2/-2 on a unit that doesn't immediately die. You've debuffed it. It hasn't died, so you still have fewer units than them, and then you use the second one on the unit you want to kill. So there is still some value to be gained there. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. It does seem like a potentially relevant counter card against swarm tactics, because this is going to be a set with a lot of kind of army size based effects, and I think this could be a very relevant sort of card in that situation. Okay, next up, Admiral Yan advising caution. He has a 3-cost command heroism ground unit. He is a 2/5 Republic official with Restore 1 and each other friendly. Heroism unit, not Republic unit. Heroism unit gets +1 HP. I think Admiral Yan could end up actually being quite strong. So 3 for a 2/5 with Restore 1 is pretty decent on its own, to be honest with you. 3 for 2/5, 7 points of stats. That's like, so the 3-cost slot is interesting because 7 points of stats used to be on curve, but we're seeing more and more units with 8 points of stats. So there are now 3-cost 3/5s in the game, so a 3-cost 2/5 isn't quite as good. He does have Restore 1 though, and this buff is going to be quite relevant, especially with a big board. And if you have those Clone Trooper tokens, they are heroism, so you can take a 2/2 and make it into a 2/3. And now because it's a 2/3, it's not going to die to that blood sport or whatever right off the bat. So I think this could be quite good. It is a little bit more defensive, just both in the stat line, the restore, and the fact that it buffs HP and not power. So we'll have to see how Admiral Yan does, but I think that I think there's at least the potential for him to be strong. All right, next up, Jango Fett, Concealing the Conspiracy, 5-cost 3/7 leader. When a friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit, you may exhaust this leader, and if you do exhaust that enemy unit, he has the Underworld and Bounty Hunter traits. He's not a Mandalorian. If you control 5 or more resources, you can deploy him, and then he has a 3/7. When a friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit, you may exhaust that unit, and this time you don't have to exhaust him. So 5 for a 3/7 is actually a pretty decent stat line, even if it's not Boba's amazing 5 for a 4/7. But it's interesting here. So when a friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit, it's worth noting that this does not say combat damage. So there are some units that can deal damage without it being combat damage. So let's take a look. Here's an example. ISB Agent. When played, you may reveal an event from your hand if you do deal 1 damage to a unit. Okay, so you can deal 1 damage to a unit with ISB Agent. You didn't have to actually attack into it, but a friendly unit just dealt damage to an enemy unit. Exhaust this leader and exhaust them. Let's say that you play... Here's a classic one, Ruthless Raider. When played and when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. Let's say, you deployed Jango last turn, and then this turn you play the Ruthless Raider, and there's 2 damage to, an enemy unit, and you get to use Jango's ability to immediately exhaust it. So I think this also works on leaders, and, maybe the strongest synergy, good old Overwhelming Barrage. Give a friendly unit +2/+2 for its phase, then it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of other units. You can fire off an Overwhelming Barrage with Jango Fett on the board and exhaust every unit that gets damaged by it. That's potentially just huge. So I think this ability is stronger than it first looks because of the potential synergies with things that deal damage outside of normal combat. And is it going to be good enough to make up for the reduced stats compared to Boba and the lack of the resource ability? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. It is worth noting that good old Fett's Fire Spray does actually say Boba or Jango Fett. So Fett's Fire Spray here, when played, if you control Boba Fett or Jango Fett as a leader or unit, ready this unit. So Fett's Fire Spray comes into play ready when you are playing Jango Fett as well as Boba Fett, and that is a very, very strong card. So I personally think that Jango has some potential. Now, is he going to be better than Set 1 Boba? To be honest, I kind of expect not, because Set 1 Boba is really, really good. But I don't think Jango will be a total joke either, and I think it may be the case that people come up with a build with him that's really good, or at least really annoying with this ability to exhaust enemy units. And it is worth noting also that that works on both ground and space, and it can even work on your opponent's leader. And so I think Jango Fett has potential. All right, next up on the doorstep, 4-cost Cunning Villainy event. Create 3 Battle Droid tokens and ready them. So Battle Droid tokens, I think I showed these earlier, but they are 1/1s. And so yeah, 0-cost 1/1 Separatist Droid Trooper. So if you're paying 4 resources to get 3/3 worth of stats, that seems pretty bad. So a 4-cost unit, you'd typically be looking at something more like 9 points of stats instead of 6. But it's worth noting that these battle droids do come into play ready, and coming into play ready is very strong in this game. So the fact that you get to ready these units immediately and potentially attack already makes it pretty cool. And then additionally, you have to consider things like, okay, on the doorstep immediately enables coordinate. There's 3 units. If you have anything with coordinate in your build, it works with this. Let's say that you have things with exploit in your build. You make these 3 battle droid tokens, they come into play ready. Maybe you make some attacks with them, then you sacrifice them to play an exploit card. That seems pretty good. So I think this card is going to end up being quite strong. Not only do you get some actually pretty good value for the cost once you consider that they come into play ready, just having the droid tokens is also going to allow you to set up other combos or synergies that I think are going to make this quite relevant. Okay. Next up, General Grievous Trophy Collector, 3-cost Vigilance Villainy ground unit. He's a 4/4 with the Separatist and official traits. He is a legendary, and ignore the aspect penalty on each lightsaber upgrade you play on this unit. On attack, if this unit has 4 or more lightsaber upgrades attached to him, defeat 4 enemy units. So, okay, so I think it's worth noting, I think that if you assume this text does not do anything and you will never use it, this card is actually good, because 3 for a 4/4 with no downside is really good. And then on top of that, he has this crazy effect with lightsabers. How often is this going to go off? Honestly, I think it's going to go off extremely infrequently. I think it's like very risky to even try to set it up, because once you start loading him up with lightsabers, if he just gets defeated and you lose a whole bunch of cards, it could be extremely negative for you. Or at least I think it'll be risky against decks that have direct removal stuff that can potentially take him out. But again, this text doesn't need to do anything for him to be good, because just having a 3-cost 4/4 is already good. And if someone wants to make the fun combo deck where you try to get all the lightsabers on Grievous and just wipe out their board, hey, more power to you. That sounds like it could be something that could be a Fun Deck Fridays type feature in the future. And maybe if someone can figure out a way to make it good, it will actually end up being crazy. Defeating 4 enemy units is super powerful. I just think it's unlikely that you will want to play out of aspect lightsabers just to enable this potential combo. I could be wrong. Maybe it'll end up being really good, but I see Grievous as a strong card just because he's a 3-cost 4/4, and then he also has this kind of fun and crazy text about lightsabers. Okay. Next up, we have Isla Sakura, Master of the Blade, 5-cost Command Heroism ground unit. She is a 6/5 with the Force Jedi and Republic traits. Coordinate on attack. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to this unit for this attack. So Isla, or however you pronounce that, is to me actually in that same category as Kit Fisto, the Smiling Jedi, where she is only good if you ambush her. Otherwise, she is a unit with no immediate board impact. So 5 for a 6/5 is a decent stat line, but she doesn't do anything when you play her. She has to actually attack and have coordinate, and I think the requirement that you have both ambush and coordinate to get her to actually do anything is... and that's a little unfair. I said to get her to do anything. You can just play her and swing for stats or whatever, but in order to get big value, I think you really do want to have the coordinate when she attacks, and to prevent the opponent from just countering her before she does anything, you want to ambush her in. So I think she's another one in the growing pile of 5 and 6 cost units that are good with ambush, bad without ambush, and maybe she's a little worse than some of the others also because you need to have coordinate with her on top of all that. I'm not super optimistic, but we'll see. Next up, we have Synchronized Strike, 2-cost command heroism event. Deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. So this is an effect that I think is maybe going to be unusually good in this set, where the tokens allow you to increase the number of units you control by quite a bit. However, I think that in constructed play, I kind of think this is going to end up being bad. And the reason that I say that is that Admiral Akbar has a similar effect for 1 more, while also giving you a quite relevant unit. So Admiral Akbar has, when played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. This is the same effect on Akbar's when played as the 2-cost Synchronized Strike. That's the same text. Deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. And then Admiral Akbar costs 1 more and gives you a 1/4 restore 1, which is quite a relevant thing in a set that has a bunch of small units, and in a set that has coordinate, where a 1/4 restore 1 might be difficult for your opponent to deal with. So there's this. So I don't think that Synchronized Strike is a terrible card, but it seems like it's basically. It seems to me that because Akbar is so much of a better deal than it, given that for 1 more you get a unit that seems quite relevant, I don't think Synchronized Strike is going to see very much play in constructed, at least, because even though it's a relevant effect, if you want this effect, Akbar does the same thing better, in my opinion. And I could be wrong, but it's an interesting case. Next up, Clone Heavy Gunner, 2-cost 1/3. Coordinate. This unit gets +2 power. Republic Clone Trooper traits and aggression aspect. So I think this is not a very good card, because 2 for a 1/3 is really bad. There are a lot of early units from your opponent that are just going to trade with this, or not even trade with it. They're going to kill it and stay alive. Even if someone plays like the Gamorrean Retainer or the Viper Probe Droid or other units that are 2-cost 3/2s and largely being played to trade with opponents' early aggro type plays, the Clone Heavy Gunner loses to those units and doesn't kill them unless you enable Coordinate. If you enable Coordinate, 2 for a 3/3 is good, but there's also 2-cost 3/3s that aren't conditional. You could play Battlefield Marine, you could play Unit Bo-Katan, and admittedly those effects are not super common at this point. But unless the Republican clone synergies are just really, really good, I don't really know why you would want to play this card, unfortunately. A fine addition, 0-cost Vigilance Villainy event. As if an enemy unit was defeated this phase, play an upgrade from your hand or from any player's discard pile. That can be yours or your opponent's, ignoring its aspect penalty. So I think, like, thematically, this is supposed to be a synergy card with Grievous. You can use it to defeat an enemy unit and take their lightsaber and put it on Grievous. That's very fluffy. That's very cool. Is it going to be very good? I kind of doubt it. I said earlier I was skeptical of the Grievous 4 lightsaber combo thing, but I think this card isn't unplayable. I think that we might well see it. So you can steal opposing upgrades with it. Now you do have to pay the cost of the upgrade. So if you defeat that unit and it has a 3-cost lightsaber, yeah, you get to ignore the aspect penalty, but you still have to pay 3 for it. However, one use that I think this has that is pretty cool is recurring bounties. So let's say that you put a bounty on an opposing unit and you defeat it. Well, that means you can use a fine addition, an enemy unit was defeated, and you can replay the bounty that you used earlier on a different enemy unit, and see where you go from there. So that seems pretty cool to me. Now, is it going to be enough for it to see a lot of play? I'm not sure. Upgrade-based strategies are kind of marginal right now, but I think it could see some play, and it is definitely a card for the General Grievous lightsaber combo fun deck. So there's that going for it as well. Next up, we have Clone Commander Cody commanding the 2/12. He is a 5-cost command ground unit, 4/4 with Overwhelm, and Coordinate. Each other friendly unit gets +1/+1 and gains Overwhelm. So if you don't have Coordinate, this guy's horrible. 5 for a 4/4 Overwhelm is far below the curve. You can get 11 points of stats at 5 or even 12, so 8 points of stats is really poor. And then if you have the Coordinate, is he good? So the dream where you have a really big board and you play this guy and that whole board just got stronger, I get that that's a powerful dream. I get that it seems really good, but I'm so skeptical. He costs 5 for a 4/4. General Dodonna is 4 for a 4/4, and that still seems kind of vulnerable. And like Dodonna does see some play. I'm not saying Dodonna's a joke. So yeah, General Dodonna here is he is a classic unit, 4 cost 4/4. Other friendly rebel units get +1/+1, and his ability is more limited because it only applies to rebels. But it's Cody has requires coordinate to be good, and you could say, well, for this effect to be good, you'd have to have a bunch of other units anyway. And like, yeah, that's kind of fair, but like 5 for a 4/4 is so inefficient. It's only conditionally good. You have to have that board. I don't know. Maybe I'm too skeptical. I will say the upside of Cody is really, really high. If you have a bunch of other units for him to support, he can be very strong, at least in principle, but I'm skeptical that situation will come up enough. I will say that he's good enough when it does come up. Maybe he's going to be worth it. Maybe you're going to play these decks that have ways to make a bunch of clone trooper tokens or even droid trooper tokens, buff them all up with Cody. Maybe you have some units with Sentinel that he's also buffing up and it's making it harder for the opponent to just remove him. I'm skeptical, but I do admit that the upside is very high. Okay. Next up, so these units haven't been put on Sweetie B yet. I'm not entirely sure what's up. It might just be that there isn't a great quality card image, but they were previewed earlier. This is Phase 1 Clone Trooper. It is a 2-cost 3/2 with the Republic clone and trooper traits, heroism aspect, and no text. Totally vanilla. I think this is actually pretty good. 2-cost 3/2 units are often played if they have situational abilities or even ones that don't necessarily do much of anything, because a 2-cost 3/2 is a stat line that allows you to trade with opposing starting units, even like powerful aggro ones. So, your opponent could lead with a 3/3 Battlefield Marine, and if you play a 2-cost 3/2, well, there's a trade. And so this stat line has kind of proven itself to be relevant enough that I think it's likely going to see at least some play, especially because of the Republican clone synergies. Is it a Supreme All-Star card? No. I mean, it's very basic. It's very vanilla. But it is something that I think is like flexible and a decent enough stat line that I think it'll likely see some play. And then next up, we have the Phase 2 Clone Trooper, a 3-cost heroism ground unit, also 3/2, also Republic clone and trooper, and it has ambush. When you play this unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. I think this one's actually a lot worse. 3 for a 3/2 ambush is, in my opinion, pretty marginal because there is a card that is 2 for a 2/1 ambush. 2 for a 3/1 ambush. That would be Cloud Rider. So I don't really think that I want to pay an extra 1 just to get 1 HP. I don't love that idea. I'm not saying for sure it's bad, but I don't know, like maybe you'll be able to ambush this in and kill a battle droid, and then you have a 3/1 still on the board. But like, it doesn't strike me as the coolest thing in the world. Maybe the Republican clone synergy will be good enough for it to be good, but this doesn't seem like a very good rate for what you get. I know ambush is a good keyword. Ambush is a sweet keyword. It's really strong. But when there's 2 for a 3/1 ambush, 3 for a 3/2 ambush seems very marginal. In a world where a lot of 0 or 1 power units are being used, that might change. More prospect for you to ambush in, survive the ambush, and stay on the field. And maybe the battle droid tokens will be enough. But paying 3 to kill a battle droid token and get a unit, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as like the strongest thing you could be doing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this will end up being good. But right now, I am more positive on the Phase 1 Clone Trooper than I am on the Phase 2 Clone Trooper. All right, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Sorry for the delay on this video, but hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll have more previews and more stuff to check out in the week ahead. Also, I will have links in the video description below to the original videos or articles or whatever where content creators revealed these cards. I'm not going to do that for like stuff that was revealed by FFG on Twitter or whatever, just like the content creator posts, because those content creator posts often have a good deal of extra analysis and so on, and you can see their take on it and see whether or not maybe they had maybe you think they had a better take on it than me. Maybe you think my take is better than theirs, but it can be useful to compare opinions. So feel free to check those out and get the original thoughts from the people who previewed these cards at first. And I will see you guys later. Thanks again for watching, and we'll be back with some more Star Wars Unlimited content later this week. Catch you guys later.